All right, how's everyone doing? So today we're going to talk about PenTest Plus version 3. The difference is kind of between version 2 and version 3. But we do have a new instructor here, Jeremiah. He's going to be focusing on Security X, which used to be CAS Plus. So we'll let him introduce himself and we'll get the ball rolling after that.
Hi, thanks, Jamario. Yeah, I'm Jeremiah Minner. I'm kind of the new person here on the block, so everything's new to me. I'm kind of getting my feet under me and understanding how this all works. But this is great. Really happy that I was able to join you here today, Jamario. As far as me, yeah, I'm a new instructor for Dion training. I also teach about 15 certification courses spread across CompTIA, EC Council, Cisco, and AWS, and I have my own cyber company as well. So happy to be here. Like you said, I am working on the Security X material. So you may see me back here in not too long, working through some of that material, doing a similar AMA as you're doing here now. So thanks for giving me time to introduce myself as we get started. I'm seeing people start to show up here in the chat on the right hand side. If you get a chance, throw into the chat where you're joining from. It's always nice to see where everybody's located. All
Yeah.
right.
Nice little humble brag. 15 other certifications that you
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
teach. You're the guy, huh? Okay, so as your question about when is PT02 retiring, I don't remember. I don't have the exact date offhand. Typically, though, with CompTIA is usually like 6 months after the official release of the new certification drops, which should be last date that they updated us was December 17th is when penetration testing plus version 3 comes out. So it should, I would say, maybe around May or June should be the last chance to actually take the version 2 if you've been studying for that. So at least a little bit from my observation, because recently, creating a course and all those things, I took version 2 and 3 kind of simultaneously just to see the big differences between the two. And one thing I can say I noticed as far as differences between the exams was there's a lot more heavy emphasis on Bash and Python in version 3, right? So that's going to be the biggest difference for most people who are trying to study. And there's a lot more focus, at least on automation, right? Because today, if we're thinking about the environment and when you're in a real live penetration testing environment, most things are going to be automated. Most people aren't manually doing a lot of things today. Understanding command line and understanding how these different, you know, language, the differences between the language structure, how things, syntax, I guess the best term to say is important, but it's not necessarily required because we all have ChatGPT, we have Gemini, we have all the tools today that can pretty much code everything for you. So you just need to be familiar with the language structure, identifying Bash, identifying Python, identifying PowerShell, different command lines, and being able to modify. That's the biggest thing. Understanding how do I modify these scripts to execute the particular task that I need. You don't have to, we're not doing things from scratch anymore. I mean, that's just the environment that we live in. And I believe that from the exam certification standpoint, that's what CompTIA has modeled in their questions and exam. So the biggest thing is, I would say, identification, understanding automation, and understanding scripting. So if you want to focus on any particular area, because if you look at the new domains, they've just changed the name to a certain degree of the domain. So for example, domain 1 is engagement management. That's going to be more so focusing on, okay, how do you interact with the client? Have your requirements, figure out exactly what they need, what they're looking for as far as a penetration testing standpoint. Because today we're in the cloud environment, right? Everything is AWS, Google Cloud Platform, or Azure, right? There's a lot of on-premise, but not as much as it used to be. It's still there, but everything is very cloud-based today. So then we have domain 2. So reconnaissance and enumeration. So we're going through figuring out how to, use public sources to get information from people, or maybe either active or passive reconnaissance. So using Whois, using, maybe Nmap scan, all those different things, right, to get information. And then we have domain 3. So we're going to focus on vulnerability discovery and analysis. So what is wrong with the systems that we find, right? And because remember, the whole purpose of this, we're not being hackers. We're trying to actually help the companies that we've been hired for to actually show them what's wrong with their system so they could, plug up any holes or anything like that. But of course, hackers do go through a similar process. So that's domain 3. Then we have attacks and exploits. That's domain 4, which used to be domain 3 for version 2. And that's going to be the biggest thing you need to focus on, right? How to attack and exploit any vulnerability that we discover. And then the last portion, one of the slight differences between version 2 and 3 is post exploitation and lateral movement. How do we stay in the environment without the client or the host knowing that we're there? So that's some of the big key differences that I've seen between version 2 and version 3. And so I think, again, when you're studying for the penetration testing exam, think about domain 4 probably more than the others, right? Really focus on attacks and exploits, understand scripting languages, and being able to modify, again, different coding languages, focusing mostly on Bash, Python, and we're gonna think about PowerShell. Because usually you have to think about Perl and all the other kind of older languages, but they really only focus on the 3 here: Python, Bash, and PowerShell. So enough of me rambling there. I just want to give a nice overview of what's going on. But yeah, what do you think about that, Jamario?
Yeah, that's great. Oh, we did find an answer for that. When does 002 retire? Looks like June 17th, 2025. Great summary of how kind of everything comes together. I do kind of have a question myself, though. How much of the exam is focused on tool implementation? Certainly the scripting languages and being able to modify scripts, but how much about tool implementation and use case development?
So when it comes to the exam, one thing I realized about CompTIA, they're not going to ask questions too much specifically about how to use the tools, because we always have the manuals available, but you need to know which tool is relevant for whatever scenario, right? So if we're going through talking about some type of vulnerability scanning analysis, right? So what type of tools are going to be used for that? What type of tools are going to be used for attacks and exploits, right? We're going to think about Mimikatz, right? It's going to be a tool that's going to be focusing on, all right, how do we dump passwords in Windows systems environments, right? Understanding some of the structure to a certain degree, again, being familiar and being able to identify things, but it's very tool heavy. You need to know which tool is appropriate for which type of domain, attacks, vulnerability analysis. You're going to think Nmap, right? So, you're scanning vulnerabilities, Nmap. We're going to do something where we're trying to stay low. So you're going to think about low bins, right? So living off the land binary tools, right? So things that you don't have to install on the system, right? You can already use PowerShell or things like that. So it's definitely very tool heavy in focus, but it's more of identification instead of implementation. So you need to just be able to recognize a lot of things for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I've done to kind of help my test on, or kind of help myself on tests like this, is I've taken the objectives, because I always start with the objectives,
Of
and I'll
course.
go through and look at the tools that are being used, and I'll write myself like a Word document that helps me be able to start categorizing and understanding where I would use these tools, in what domains, or in what phases of the attack. And that really helped me kind of orient myself to where all the tools are. Otherwise, it's just a big smattering of tools that I'm trying to figure out how to keep straight in my head.
Exactly. When it comes to humans, right, we need to have reason, right? We need to associate reasons for tools, reasons for things. If not, it's just random words, So, but it's definitely important, again, back to your question and anyone listening, focusing on understanding which tools are used for which phases and for what, right? And which would be better in this scenario versus another. So I think that's the biggest thing to understand.
Great, thanks. Yeah, seeing a lot of people joining us from all over the place in the chat. Awesome. Yeah, just throw your questions into the chat as we move along. Let's see, Jamario, any other specifics about the exam or the format, or I presume we've still got those performance-based questions. Did you notice anything different about the format or the structure of the performance-based questions for this version of the exam as opposed to others?
Not really. I think they definitely kept a similar format with the performance-based questions. And again, a thing that Jason loves to present every time when we're starting the exam, right, is just skip the simulations, because when you first start off, it's going to be probably like 5 or maybe 4 or 5 questions based off of simulations, and it's best to go ahead and skip those, go to the other questions from a time management standpoint, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to pass, we want to get the certification exam, and so we want to make sure that we skip those, answer the questions, and then go back. Make sure you flag them, go back, and then do those. Now, one thing I can say from the simulation standpoint, it's a lot of like drag and drop, right? You're just dragging and dropping, figuring out. I'm trying to think. It was the ones I was focusing on mostly was like HTTP smuggling, right? I remember that question because it was weird. I'm like, what is this? And I remember going over it, but understanding material kind of helped me be able to answer the questions. So it's going to go over and ask different questions like, okay, if you're going through, it's going to give a scenario, of course, and then we're going to focus on, all right, drag and drop different scenarios based. So you got to answer the question based off of what do you see wrong with that particular vulnerability or whatever it is, right? So it wants you to do a lot of identification of things and what will mitigate those particular vulnerabilities that you find in the scenario. So it's not, again, the good thing about it is you get to eliminate things, right? It's not like coming out, it's not like, an open-ended question or whatever, but you do start off with a lot of simulations from the very beginning, skip them, answer the regular questions, and then come back. Because one thing I believe is that if you go through and you answer a lot of questions later on, it jars you to be able to answer the simulation questions, because it reminds you, it triggers certain things, and you like, oh, okay, that is the answer for this type of scenario. That reminds me of the simulation question that I had earlier, and now it helps you answer that question better. So I believe that they kind of like hint a lot of answers later on. If you go back to the simulations, then it helps you out better. So that's one thing I would say for sure. Skip the simulations and just come back to it later.
Yep, skip them and then come back to them later. That's some great advice.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taken my fair share of CompTIA examinations, and for those performance-based questions,
Mhm.
I think I've only ever walked away from like 1, maybe 2 performance-based questions where I thought to myself, I knocked that one out of the park.
Yeah.
So for all others, I could have spent more time looking at them and going, well, did I answer this right? Is my assumptions right? So I really like the idea of reserving some time in the exam to take those performance-based questions and then
Mhm.
swinging back to them at the end of the exam, and then
Yeah.
holding myself to that amount of time that I've dedicated for them. That way I can answer all the questions, because CompTIA, of course, doesn't take points away if you answer a question wrong,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get any of the points for the questions that you don't ask.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. So I seen there was a question up there. What are the essential skills or knowledge I should focus on first to succeed with the new CompTIA PenTest Plus exam? I kind of briefly touched on this before, but like Jeremiah asked earlier, it's very tool focused. So you need to be able to identify which tools are used for what type of scenarios. It's going to be a part of vulnerability analysis. It's going to be a part of attacks and exploits. What would you be using these tools for? And understanding also, a lot of these tools will be command line based. So being able to identify, for example, who is, what is an output if you do a who is command? What does that look like? What does an output of an nmap scan looks like? So you need to be able to identify these things. And so then you can answer the question, because it's going to be multiple choice, right? So you just need to be able to eliminate what's not correct and what a bash script looks like, right? What type of syntax is that? Python, understanding. So when you have a Python question, you have to think about, how does a Python script start off? Does it have including different libraries, right? Understanding Python libraries versus Bash libraries versus PowerShell, how those things are structured. So again, back to the question, focus on identifying Python, PowerShell, Bash scripts, and different tools, right? What are these tools going to be used for? Are they going to be used for the initial phases of reconnaissance? Are they going to be used for attacks and exploits? Are they going to be used for post-exploitation, right? So understanding that is going to be the best thing you can focus on in order to pass the test.
Awesome. Thanks. I do have a question though. So I like to be hands-on. The way that my head works, I like to know how things work
Yeah,
and what sort of output I'm going to get when I type something into that command
of
line.
course.
So what do you recommend for people who want to learn, who want to do the typey of the
Yeah,
commands without actually getting in trouble for hacking somebody?
exactly. The same one I say every single time. Tryhackme.com. I love that site. It's the best site. It has so many different scenarios that you can use. It comes installed with virtual machines, right? So you can, if you don't have, so what I like to do, I have Kali Linux on my Mac. I used to be a Windows person, but then Jason sent me a Mac, so now I use Mac and stuff or whatever. So I use Parallels as far as my virtual machine environment, but typically we recommend using VirtualBox and installing Kali Linux on there. So once you have Kali Linux on there, you're able to connect to their virtual environment, so their VLAN, and then you can attack the boxes directly. But if you don't have that, they allow you to pretty much do it in browser. So they'll give you a scenario, you can use their box, and they'll have an in-browser version with Kali Linux on there. And so then you can attack the systems from there. And it's great. I mean, it has a lot of walkthroughs. It gives you step-by-step scenarios. You see, they're just hundreds of different scenarios that they have, and they actually have one specifically for PenTest Plus. So they have a PenTest Plus learning path that you can use, and it's going to go through. Now, I don't think they've updated to version 3, but they do have it for version 2, so they're going to go through all the different domains. So we got planning and scoping, information gathering, vulnerability scanning, attacks and exploits, reporting and communication, and tools and code analysis. So they have all those different domains, and they're going to break down different lessons to correlate with those particular domains. So TryHackMe is definitely the best one you can use. There's other ones, of course, but that's always been the best go-to for me, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one that I tend to go to. I also look at Pico CTF, Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, and
Yeah,
then there's VulnHub where I can just go and grab some machines and then work on
yeah.
those. One of the things that I've noticed about Try Hack Me and Hack the Box is that they have a free tier. So going and
Yeah.
getting access to those machines and those learning paths may not cost me much money at all. Now, they're like I guess we're inferring, there are of course paid tiers as well, but a
Yeah.
lot of times that just gives you access to the retired machines that we can go and play with as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, great resource. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the best one I've seen. Yeah, it just, because again, like most people, I feel like we understand things once we mess something up, right? Once we try to attack something and it don't work, we're like, okay. Now that's why it sticks more. It sticks more when you do performance-based things. And because me personally, I'm not a person to be able to just read things all day and get excited about it. I want to be touching it, right? I want to be hacking. I want to feel like I'm doing something wrong. I want to feel like I'm a hacker or whatever it is. And like I said before, I know you mentioned other resources, but Try Hack Me is the best one. And I believe, like, I pay for the year version. I think it's only like $89 a year. So nothing crazy. But I think it's definitely money well spent for sure. Well spent for sure.
Yeah. Hey, I do see a question in the chat there, kind of asking about the differences between Pen Test Plus and Security Plus or CYSA. Like, where does that fit in? Where does Pen Test Plus fit in to kind of the CompTIA the hierarchy of courses or the other courses that kind of support and surround it?
Yeah. So one thing I remember Jason like to say, when it comes to hiring, right? When you think about job, what jobs are available. There's pretty much 4 defend jobs versus every 1 penetration tester, right? So everything's about defense, right? Think about the military, right? It's the Department of Defense. So everything's about defending different things. So Security Plus and CISA is about defending against attackers. We want to be able to defend. Penetration testing is the attack version of it. So that's going to be where you're hired to actually go through and attack another company's network, X, Y, and Z to, figure out what holes are there, right? Because the truth is, like, you might think your defense is great, but you never know until someone tries to break into your house, right? Now you know if the alarm system really works, if your locks are really good, or have the burglars upgraded to these new type of tools to be able to take things out, right? And you only learn that from doing a penetration test. So typically a lot of companies, so if you think about NIST 853 standard, what a lot of different companies use, and it actually has requirements for you to have an annual penetration testing assessment, right? To again, because that's how you really get the information about, are your locks good, or is your system safe? Is your code being programmed correctly, right? Static code analysis, all these different things, right? Because sometimes you can't see these things when you do a regular vulnerability scan from a dynamic type of tool, when you need to see the code itself, right? So these things will be tested typically doing a penetration test, depending on the scope. And that's all based off the contractual, obligations and things like that, right? So if you're gonna pay a lot of money, it's gonna be more in depth. Pay less money, you'll get some information, but not too much. But again, so back to the key difference: penetration testing is attacking. Everything else is about defense. So when I first joined the military, not when I first joined, I had to switch jobs. I used to work on aircraft. The B-1 bomber, and I did a little networking on that system. But I switched to cyber transport. So I became pretty much focused heavily on security and networking principles. But in order to even get the job, I had to pass Security Plus, right? And so that's how I got introduced to Security Plus in CompTIA. That's back in 2016. So that everything in the military is about defense. So Security Plus, CISA, defense, penetration testing, attacking. That's probably the fun thing. I feel like a lot of people want to be the attackers and go do the stuff, right? Defense is cool, but everyone wants to be attackers. Think about video games, right? You're trying to go do stuff, get points, slash or whatever. And everything else is about defense. So that's the biggest thing. But from a job opportunity standpoint, CISA Plus and Security Plus is going to probably give you more bang for your buck, because they're just literally just more opportunities available in the defense sector than the attack sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you mentioned something there that really kind of sparked some interest, or at least some thoughts in my head. You mentioned that during a penetration test that you might be checking to see whether your locks are good. So that kind of reminds me that there's two aspects to penetration testing. There's technical penetration testing, and there is physical penetration testing.
Yes.
And so how much of the physical penetration testing does the CompTIA PenTest Plus exam go into?
I don't think it really goes into much. Now, there was a few questions about specific type of locking tools that you can use to open doors, or like if you're in a server room, and what type of locks would be best to break in or whatnot. But it's definitely a small portion, because I believe they understand the environment's changing and everything is network-based, everything is cloud-based. Most people just aren't having a lot of physical servers and stuff like that, because everything's so centralized now with cloud environments. You're going to be in some big warehouse and everyone's stuff is there. So as far as your question, when it comes to the exam, very little questions about physical security that I see.
Awesome. Back to that question that we just had. Somebody was asking about, hey, how does PenTest Plus fit into the Security Plus, PenTest, and CISA kind of hierarchy? So I'm looking here at the CompTIA website, and they're recommending for PenTest that you have Network Plus and Security Plus or equivalent level of knowledge, and a minimum of 3 to 4 years of hands-on information security or related experience. So I think from CompTIA's perspective, they kind of view Security Plus as that opening argument, and that knowledge as being built upon in either CYSA or Security Plus. I'm sorry, either in CYSA or PenTest Plus. And when I look at Security X, I see the same thing, where the PenTest Plus, CYSA, and the Security Plus are being built upon for the Security X topics as well.
Yep, no, for sure. And one thing I would say, because a lot of people, want to kind of jump straight into security, if we're going to pick a certification to get prior to jumping to security, it's going to be Network Plus or any type of networking, because especially today, everything's about how do I get this data from one place to another, and all the routing, switching, and all the different protocols in between there. It's important to know them, because you can't know how to protect them until you know they exist, right? You need to understand these protocols, and everything, again, is network based. So like a lot of times with companies I work for, we'll do like CVSS scoring, right? To rescoring different vulnerabilities based off our particular environment. But the biggest vector is always networking. You need to be everyone's getting attacked from across the world, right? Most people aren't physically, like we was asking about the physical aspect of the test, most people aren't physically walking into these, data centers and stuff like that. most times there's going to be a scenario where they're trying to attack based off the network protocols and principles that's being used there. So for people who are new to it, I know PenTest Plus sounds fun, and it's definitely the best course I ever made. I love it from the standpoint of just like, it's just more engaging than everything else. But understanding networking principles is just the most important thing you can do as far as if you're trying to get in the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, wow. You know what? In the courses, when I'm teaching kind of the CompTIA series of courses, I jump up and down about networking, just like you
Yeah,
did there.
yeah,
And I'm like, hey, pen test is cool, right?
yeah,
You get to be in there and be the hacker. But guess what? If you launch the perfect exploit and you get a
yeah,
command line on somebody's machine, what are you going to do? If
yeah,
you don't understand how IP addressing schemas work, if you don't understand how networks are put together and how
yes,
defenders think, you're
yes,
not going to be able to do it. You're going
yeah,
to be stuck right there. So yeah, that's
yeah.
great. I really like thinking about networking. What tools do you recommend people use to get good at networking? I mean, yeah, there's the CompTIA Network Plus exam that really helps. And I know we're not talking
Yeah,
about that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
as a pen tester, what tools can I use to help me get familiar with those networking concepts?
One thing I used to use a long time ago was Packet Tracer. Now I'm not sure how up to date it is now, but that's where you could, you have a virtual environment. You can put a networking switch there. You can do all these things, and you can understand how to use command line different commands against different boxes. Right? You can know how one packet from your device makes it to the endpoint, right? So Packet Tracer was what I used when I was just learning about networking, because again, primarily when I was in the military, my job was networking. It wasn't really about security initially. It was more so about networking. How do you, because I did multiple things. So I did standalone stations. So pretty much we go through, have like small data centers and understanding how to defend against those virtual environments or whatnot. But primarily when I first joined, it was creating a network from nothing, right? You're getting dropped off in the middle of nowhere. You got a satellite antenna, and then you're running the physical cables to your router and switch, and you're creating a whole little makeshift command center, right? So you're actually routing the cables, right? So you're doing all those things from scratch, and that's was my primary, introduction into the world of networking. And then of course you need to now, since it is Department of Defense, you need to know how to secure these things, right? Because again, we just don't realize how much. I love looking up. I think the website, I forgot. Is it Red Eye? Is the company? I can't remember, but it shows us a live view of all the attacks that's happening right now, and we're being attacked all the time, like hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of attacks daily. And United States is doing a lot of attacking too. We're not just defenders. We're penetration testers when it comes to the United States as well. Penetration testers, hackers. But it's just so much happening right now because we can't see it, right? We can't see data packets flowing. Like you can think about our phone, right? Just information just comes to our phone. We can't see the waves or any of those things, but all these protocols and ports and all these different things are important to understand if you want to be good at cybersecurity, penetration testing, whatever it is. But I think it's fascinating. If anyone, hopefully, one of our hosts or the people in the back and support can pull up the site that shows the live feed of the attacks, and I think people would, their eyebrows would really raise if they saw.
Yeah, well, if you just Google live threat map or cyber threat
Yeah,
map,
something like
you'll see a couple of them come up.
that.
There's a few, and they're all kind of monitoring their own honeypots or honey networks to be
Yes.
able to show people how attacks are happening in real time.
Yep.
I love showing that too, because it just, wow, it really orients me to this attack world. Maybe not a pen
Yeah.
testing world, but at least an
Yep.
attack world. Kind of showing what we as pen testers are trying to emulate and what the role of defenders are, because it's not like from a defender perspective, it's not like they aren't getting attacked. They absolutely
There
are.
it
Yeah. So there we
is.
go. Up
Yeah.
there in the on the screen there, we see a live threat, and each one of those lines is an attack that's being monitored and seen as we go around the globe. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
bringing that up.
Yeah. That's a cool one. Yeah. I like that one.
Yep. And then I see, back to your discussion about Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is a great tool, and it's free to use. I mean, you got to get an account, but after that, it's a free tool to use, and certainly is a great supplement for penetration testing and that type of learning.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing that I used it for was understanding tunneling. For some reason, I used to be very confused about how tunneling worked. But I think I was using GRE tunnels back in the day. I'm not sure if that protocol is still something that's being used, but understanding tunnels, packets, and I think another thing using Wireshark definitely is great to be able to identify these packets, see the breakdown of all the different protocols, right, and seeing what a computer sees once it receives it. Because the computer doesn't understand anything, right? It's just receiving packets in certain orders, and we have different, structure. And I think seeing that and understanding that specifically would help a lot. So Wireshark is definitely a good tool as well.
Yeah, wow, Wireshark. I love that tool. And one of the things that, like I said earlier, I'm kind of one of those hands-on people that wants to see everything.
Yeah,
So for Wireshark, what I'll sometimes do is I'll bring up Wireshark, monitor and interface, and then run some nmap commands and just see what happens.
yeah,
Because we often talk about in the courses like the TCP handshake or the 4 steps of DHCP, but with Wireshark, you can actually go in and look at those, and it
yeah.
just brings a whole nother level of recognition when I'm trying to learn about this.
Yeah, I think definitely, like you mentioned before, like when you're teaching courses or whatnot, I was teaching as well at California Institute of Arts and Technology. I was teaching that network security, and I would always show students the Wireshark pull-up of the TCP handshake, right? So you see the sync acknowledge, and the acknowledge or whatnot. Seeing that is definitely, I believe it just crystallizes the information that we try to learn when we're getting ready for the penetration testing. Security Plus, which is going to be, most people are just trying to get Security Plus, right? Because that's a requirement for a lot of people. But I do know as things are slightly transitioning because are you still work for the DoD? I can't remember. Are you still
Yes.
in?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I know they're transitioning the 8570 to 8140. So I know there's more emphasis now on experience versus just having a specific certification. So I know that's one transition that the Department of Defense has made more recently.
Yeah. Oh, I see a comment in the in the section of comments. It's somebody talking about that PenTest Plus did emphasize Nmap a lot.
Yeah, oh, for
Nmap
sure.
Nmap is a tool, right? I think we've
Yeah.
even bring it up in A plus, then again in Network Plus, then again in Security Plus, in CISA, and in PenTest. My goodness, that is a tool that this organization CompTIA really wants us to know a lot about.
No, for sure. And one thing I can say, right, uh, with CompTIA, because they're vendor neutral, so they try to have a wide range of you understanding different tools. But in real life, in real penetration testing, you're only going to use a few tools. You're not going to use these 30 or 40 tools. You're going to use Nmap. You're going to use Metasploit. You're going to use some, living off the land binary tools, right? But those are going to be the big ones: Metasploit and Nmap. Everything else can be more niche, depending, maybe, Trivy, if you're scanning code bases, GitHub code bases, things of that nature. And then maybe more Kubernetes type tools, maybe Kube Hunter, things of that nature, when you're trying to emphasize specific type of, um, environments per se in the cloud version. But you're only really going to use Nmap, Metasploit, and a few other tools. It's probably going to be like 5 or 6 industry standard tools that most penetration testers use, at least from my experience of being a part of pen tests and going back and forth with them, stuff like that.
Yeah, those high value tools. Excellent. Well, I think we do have some more questions here in the chat. And so we'll get some thrown up on the board and see what people are asking about. Let's see. Here we go. Is the Wireshark method, or oh, sorry, is our Wireshark method approaches still being used today for monitoring?
I believe so, but I think honestly it's almost a little bit less effective because everything's encrypted, right? It's really good to see Wireshark when you have like unencrypted things with HTTP. You can see passwords being transferred back and forth. But since everything by nature with every browser is encrypted, it seems to be, from my opinion, less useful because you can see things go back and forth, but you don't know what's being sent back and forth. So I would say less so than it used to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. Everything the standard should be encryption, encryption,
Yeah,
encryption, zero trust, zero trust, zero
yeah,
trust. So that does make tools like Wireshark a little bit, I guess, somewhat less valuable. I am constantly surprised at at some of the basic security principles that we find not being applied
yeah,
in enterprise environments, though. So I
yeah,
wouldn't rule Wireshark out, right? It's still a potential very usable tool.
yeah.
I see a comment up there about Metasploit. Yeah, Metasploit's a great tool. It's very robust.
Yeah.
It can be and it's simple to use.
Yeah, it encompasses everything. It's like a one-stop shop. You know what I'm saying? Like it has, you can even do scanning from there. It even has forms of, vulnerability scanning and everything, right? That exploits, post-exploitation. Because even in the course for penetration, for Pen Test Plus 3, a lot of the examples I use Metasploit because it's just a one-stop shop. You can, especially once you use the interpreter in Metasploit, is a game changer, right? You can just easily do different things, right? If you want to go through and, like earlier I mentioned Mimikatz, but again, Metasploit has its own password dumping features, right? It's all exploited. So like they said, become a Metasploit guru. I completely agree because you can pretty much do everything with just Metasploit and Nmap.
Yeah,
And,
great
and I
point.
believe the test emphasizes that as well.
Cool. And you mentioned Meterpreter, and just for those kind of following along, Meterpreter, at least from my understanding, Jamario, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
is it's a command line, but it's kind of a special command line that has
Yes.
some pre-built exploit commands already
Yes.
built into it. So if we
Yeah.
can, I'm sorry, if an ethical hacker, of course, can get access to a machine and get a command line, they might be able to upgrade that to a Meterpreter shell
Yeah.
through something like Metasploit, and then be able to have access to those pre-built malicious commands.
Yep. Yep, for sure. So they have a question about the course
Yeah.
for the new cert. Yep, we have that ready. So I've been spending the last few months, actually probably a bit more than that, focusing on Pen Test Plus version 3. I hope all you get it. I love it. I put a lot of work into it, so please, give some great feedback about it. But it's already ready. So whenever the exam drops, so it should right now it's tentatively scheduled for December 17th as far as the exam being released. And so we always release at the same time as the new exam comes out. So December 17th is the tentative time that we have for the new certification course.
Excellent. Thanks. That's exciting. I'm excited to. I haven't had a chance to look at your course yet, Jamario, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to get in there and take a look. All
Check it
right.
out, man. Check it out.
I will. Absolutely. All right. Next one here. How is CompTIA used for data governance, management, and record management retention and audit hold and legal hold user roles?
Very specific question.
Yeah. Yeah.
CompTIA in general now. So CompTIA has a lot of different certifications, right? So they have, it's not just penetration testing and Security Plus or whatnot. I don't know off the top of my head the one specifically for like GRC, right? Governance, what's the GRC stand for? Governance,
Regulations and compliance.
regulation, and the other one I forgot. But I don't know. I'm not actually even sure. Do you know, Jeremiah?
I don't think that there is a specific GRC CompTIA certification, but certainly I'm used to seeing domains that are dedicated almost
Yes.
exclusively to GRC within the individual certifications. And as far as like audit hold or legal hold user roles, at least in my experience, CompTIA doesn't focus too much on those roles. Certainly, we talk about legal hold and the definition of it and what we as enterprise organizations might need to do to prepare for that and why we might be using it. But there aren't really certifications that I'm tracking that are specific to those.
Yeah.
All
But I
right.
know other regulating bodies, they definitely emphasize that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but definitely non-CompTIA bodies definitely focus on GRC for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there are professions that are GRC.
Yeah.
All right. So a question here. Will the CompTIA PenTest 002 book from Cibex be good enough preparation for the 003 exam?
I didn't see, typically when I'm going through and creating courses, I only use the CompTIA official instructor guides. So I don't really use Cybex. So I'm not necessarily sure. I can't really answer that, I would say, accurately. But I do, from what I've seen, most of them, long as they are encompassing and covering every domain, I mean, it typically should be good enough. But again, for me personally, when I'm studying or getting ready for a cybersecurity exam, I like reading through books. But again, I like to go through and use TryHack Me or use a course from Dion training, right? Because we gonna have the one great thing I believe about us is we have a lot of demonstrations, so people can actually see and get that hands-on keyboard type of experience, or at least follow what we do. So I guess I'm not sure. I don't know Cybex enough to be able to answer that question accurately.
Yeah, I'll chime in here for just a second. As a CompTIA instructor, when CompTIA goes through and renews courses, the standard is that about 20 to 25% of the old material will be replaced with updated material.
Yeah.
So my recommendation to students is always, if you have a study material from a particular version of the exam and it's not the current one, then I would find some current material. And like you said, I have always used Dion training products, so I like them. I think they fill that gap really nicely to learn about the current versions of the current courses. But
Yeah.
I always kind of hesitate to recommend somebody use a previous version of the exam material to prepare for a different exam.
Yeah. I agree.
All right. Another question from Christian. I've been studying version 2 this year. Should I wait for version 3?
So recently I took both of the, of course, I took both of the exams very close to each other. I believe, depending on how long you've been studying for version 2, maybe you should go ahead and take version 2 if you already feel like you have covered all domains and you're ready to take the test. I would say take it. But if you're trying to focus on being ready for the industry today, that's why the version 3 is there, and it's going to have more of the updated tools, more of the more modern approaches to penetration testing. But if you're just trying to get the certification and you've already been studying for version 2, I think you should go ahead and take version 2.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my experience, I have never been challenged other than in an academic and teaching uh, scenario. I've never been challenged to say, like, do you have the current version of the current test?
Yeah,
Right? Because most employers are going to say, do you have PenTest Plus? They're
exactly.
not going to ask you, do you have version 2? Do you have version 3? And what was your score? That's
Yeah,
just not
they
something
don't
that
care.
the employers are going to be looking at. So
Checking the box.
yeah, so I like that answer as far as, what's more important, being able to get the certification, or are you doing it to have the most updated knowledge on how the industry is working today? If that's your goal, yeah, I like version 3. But if your goal is to have a PenTest Plus certification, then, well, first of all, I think you should get Jamario's course. But I have never even heard of many people being challenged to have the most up to date course certification,
Yeah,
unless somebody's asking me to teach a course and then they want to make sure that I have the current certification.
exactly. I love that answer, Jeremiah. It's great.
Thank you. All right. Next one here from Alexander. How does the new PenTest Plus hold up against other pen testing certifications like CEH or OSCP? Is it the best way to break into the pen testing field?
I would say so. One thing, the difference between CEH, again, unless they changed it recently, I know the biggest difference with PenTest Plus and CEH was the fact that PenTest Plus has the simulations, right? So it has some hands-on questions. With CEH, it should be all 100% multiple choice. So you're not going to be prompted to use the tools or understand a use case from a command line standpoint, right? And OSCP, that's a very advanced certification. I believe that's still the one where it's 24 hours and you're doing live hacking. That's very advanced. That's very experienced. So that's not an entry level at all. So CH, I would say, would probably be easier than PenTest Plus because it's fully multiple choice only. But I personally still like PenTest Plus because, again, it makes you have to understand the questions and understand the implementation of the tools, how to use them, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, so I have CEH as well, and one thing that well, I get asked this question often too. One
Yeah,
thing that I like to point out is that penetration testing is a part of certified ethical hacking, but
yeah,
from the EC Council perspective, penetration testing is only a part. There are other parts of being a certified ethical hacker, which
Mhm.
include some of that cyber defense, the CISA material, and some of the Security Plus material.
Yeah,
Whereas Pen Test Plus focuses really heavy on just the well, from meeting with stakeholders to conducting a pen test to writing up the report. And in
exactly.
CEH, I didn't see that as much. It wasn't as focused on that process as it
Yeah,
was. Well, pen testing is part of what we do, but it's not everything we do.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's kind of the way that I like to think about CEH.
yeah. I mean, that
Awesome.
is true for sure. Coming from a standpoint of when I've been involved in penetration testings for the companies that I work for, literally, for example, it took about 8 months just to start the test because we were getting ready. All the engagement portion, all the determining what's in scope and out of scope. That was the biggest portion of it. I think the testing only lasted for like a month or 2 months, but all the preparation and the reporting and tools, that was like 70% of it. So I think from a practical standpoint, that portion, like you mentioned, the reporting, the engagement, that's technically more important from a in real life, I would say, because they're paying for things, right? It's a business at the end of the day. So that's the biggest thing I would say.
Yeah. I don't really see any more questions in the chat. So if you have something, drop it in there. But I just wanted to ask kind of one more question just to get us talking about it.
Okay.
Because a question that I often get asked is, how do I break into this field? How can I demonstrate
Mhm.
hands-on ability without actually being a hacker and doing some malicious
Exactly.
hacking? And you mentioned try hack me, hack the box, which I
Mhm.
think is an awesome first step. What else can people do to prove their hands-on keyboardness?
HackerOne. That's a website that I've used before. Pretty much it's like the version of crowdsourcing penetration testing, right? So a lot of different companies, they'll get on there, and if you find different vulnerabilities, they'll pay you money, right? They'll pay you, depending on the company, anywhere from like $200 to maybe $5,000 of what I've seen. So you get to, I've done it a few times. You get to hack the systems. The companies, they let you know what's in scope and what's out of scope. So pretty much you're becoming your penetration tester, and you're able to prove you've done it. If you're able to successfully hack a company's site, or find a vulnerability, or find an exploit and prove it to them. So the biggest thing to get paid is you have to have the proper reporting structure correct, right? So you have to be able to demonstrate it and be able to thoroughly explain what's going on, right? Just like a true penetration tester. And you don't need to be hired. You don't have to become a penetration tester to work for a company. You can just sign up today, HackerOne, and go and start hacking different companies too. Websites. It's definitely focused more so, from what I've seen, a lot on just regular um, web applications. Seems to be the most prevalent ones. But yeah, so that's the best way to get your experience and to prove to employers that, hey, I can do this. I've done it. Here is my proof. So HackerOne.
Yeah, HackerOne's great because like you said, you can sign up, become a security researcher, be a hacker that goes out and actually hacks production network systems
Yeah,
within a
of
scope,
course. Yeah,
and
it's
then you can
awesome.
collect that bug bounty, which
Yeah,
is the reward.
yeah,
And like you mentioned, there are rewards that are small, and there are rewards that are really, really long. And I'm sorry,
yeah,
not long, really, really large. Great. All
yeah.
right. Do you have anything else, Jamaro, that you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
Nothing else. I mean, again, the course comes out roughly around December 17th. So buy the course. Give us some great feedback, because we're always trying to update things and make them better based off the feedback from the students. And so yeah, that's all I got.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's been great. This is my first Ask Me Anything. So
Yeah.
thank you for being nice to me, Jamario, and not
Yeah.
asking me the hard questions. That was really
Yeah.
nice. And I look forward to seeing everybody again. Whenever we do another one of these, it's preparing for Security X. That's the course that I'm working on. And I look forward to Jamario, when your course comes out, getting my hands on it so I can see all the new stuff. And then I
Yep.
look forward to seeing everybody again when we're talking about Security X.
Awesome, man.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.